Welcome to MMA on the Rocks. My name is Bill Welker. You are listening to episode 203 of the podcast. You're joining me live on Facebook or YouTube. Today is Sunday, August 9th. More than halfway through summer. You guys believe that? Everybody's in such a hurry for 2020 to be over, according to what I read on social media. And it's quickly happening. Some places are going to be back to school next week. I think Florida is starting school next week. It's kind of a scary thing considering everything that's going on. Lots of MMA action this weekend. No Jeff the Animal Wilson tonight. If anybody knows of his whereabouts or has been in contact with Jeff the Animal Wilson in the past 8 hours or so, please let me know. I sent him the link to join in the show. He may appear at some point. He may not. He's so full of surprises. I never know what I'm going to get with that guy, which is what makes him so entertaining and such an integral part of MMA on the Rocks. In any case, I'm going to try and carry the show solo. I haven't done one of these in a while, so you guys are just going to be hearing me talk for the next however long I talk for until I get too tired and I turn this thing off. So I'll tell you guys, I was talking about buying a new bike recently, and I finally pulled the trigger and bought one. I did a lot of research. I want to thank everybody who reached out when I announced on the show that I was in the market for a bike, and everybody who reached out on Twitter and Instagram, and just people who listened to the show who happen to have my phone number and texted me for all your recommendations. Everything really came in handy. Did a lot of research. I wound up getting a bike called a brand called Specialized, and the model is the Cirrus 2.0. So it's a hybrid bike. I was looking for something that could do like road traffic and a little bit of off-road, like some gravel and dirt trails and things like that. So I went with that, and I put some tires with a little extra tread on them, and I really like it. It's a fun bike to ride. It's definitely an upgrade from the crappy mountain bike I bought from Dick's Sporting Goods like 5 or 6 years ago. So plan on having a lot of fun with that. Tried it out yesterday. Did about 8 miles with the baby trailer. So we got a new trailer for the baby, and she seemed to like it. She actually fell asleep in it around mile 4 or 5 or so. But we did a cool little loop trail in North Tampa. Stopped and had a picnic. It was nice, but it's definitely hot out. And then this morning, went out with my buddies Paul and Matt. Shout out to them. My buddies from the gym, a couple of blue belts there, took me out on the roads today. We did 32.5 miles. And for those of you who cycle a lot, I don't know if that's a lot. I guess it felt like a lot because it was like 95 degrees today or something and humid. So towards the end of that ride, I was definitely starting to feel the heat. It took me a little while to cool down after it, but the new bike held up. We went down through Clearwater Beach, through Scientology territory. Waved to Tom Cruise's windows. I don't know if he was in there or not, but we waved to him. Shout out to Tom Cruise if you listen to the show. He might. It's always a possibility. But it was a good time. So thanks to those guys for bringing me out, doing a little road cycling, which is kind of crazy because, there's so many different laws and rules and things you can do and can't do. And, things that drivers are supposed to know that I definitely don't know. So I just assume everybody else doesn't know. It's a scary thing when you're just on a bicycle and you're going like 20 miles an hour and there's 2 tons of steel that's really close to you. But I guess something I got to get used to. So that was a good time. If you guys are watching on Facebook or YouTube, you could probably tell I got a little bit of sun. I'm sure you're all aware by now that I am quite fair-skinned, despite living in Florida. 4+ years living here, and I still haven't gotten that base tan down yet. I don't know if it's something that's genetically possible or not, but Hey, we'll find out. So no Jeff the Animal Wilson tonight. If you're just joining the show, if you want to harass him on social media for disappearing on me, please do at animal_Wilson on Twitter and Instagram. Send him a message. Start trolling him. Start bugging him for not answering his phone. Maybe once he sees all the notifications, he'll start responding. I guess I'm not popular enough to get a response from him. So instead of the animal, I'm joined only by tequila tonight. So that should make it an interesting show. And let me tell you about what is quickly becoming my favorite tequila brand, and that is Maestro Dobel. I'm drinking the Humito tonight, which is a smoked silver tequila. So the last couple of weeks, I've been telling you guys about aged tequilas. So tequilas that have, been sitting in some oak barrels that bring out some of those sugary bourbon type flavors. This is a silver tequila, so it has not been aged, but it has had flavor added to it in the form of smoke. They use mesquite wood to bring some smokiness to it. It doesn't affect the color at all, so it's still silver for those of you watching on video. And it's got a real smoky flavor to it. It's like a brisket almost, like a nice salty brisket. It's really a nice tasting tequila. It's got a big burn on the back end, so when it hits the back of the throat, it really kind of opens up, and you feel like the fire from the alcohol. Even though it's only 80 proof, it's still got a big burn to it. So I would suggest maybe a couple of ice cubes. If you like a spicy margarita, then this one would be good. You'd throw a couple of jalapenos in it, maybe like a couple of chunks of watermelon. This would make a nice spicy margarita if you're into that sort of thing. Our buddy Mark Fellow is joining from the other side of the world in Australia. Do drinking and driving laws also apply to bicycles in the U.S.? I have never heard of anybody getting arrested for being drunk on a bicycle. I almost thought it was like you were supposed to be drunk if you're riding a bicycle, but I could be wrong on that. I'll have to defer to some of my cycling friends on that one, but I will get an answer for you. In any case, Maestro Dobel, I was telling you guys about the Añejo a couple of weeks ago. That is my favorite aged tequila right now, just because it's the closest thing to bourbon that I've tasted in a tequila, and I really like that really oaky. It's really got that sweetness that's pulled out of the oak by the alcohol from the aging process. But this one's really nice too. I don't know if I would drink this one so much neat. I could use an ice cube or two. But it's definitely a nice sipper. It's got that real smoky feel. It's like you're sitting next to a campfire or something. So it's pretty good. It's got a little bit of a peppery spice to it too. One more thing I want to tell you guys about before I get into the MMA action from this weekend, and there was a lot of it. My buddy Nate Evans has his podcast, MMA True Fan, which is like a documentary series style podcast. And they just released their latest episode. Their plan is to release one about every other month. So the last one I told you guys about, and we had Nate on the show to talk about it, was the George St. Pierre episode. And that one was about 2 hours. Really great information about George St. Pierre. If you're a fan of his and you missed me talking about the MMA True Fan podcast, go and check it out. I said this to Nate when he was on the show too. I'm typically not a fan of overproduced podcasts with like music in the background and that it's all cut together documentary style, but they really do an awesome job. I've been following MMA for as long as I can remember, and I feel like I know a lot of things, but when I listen to MMA True Fan, every episode I pick up something like, wow, I didn't even know that part of the story. They really do a good job of digging deep, and they talk to a lot of relevant people. So the latest episode that just came out is about Hoist Gracie. I'm sure many of you know, casual or hardcore fans alike, who Hoist Gracie is, the winner of UFC 1. He's beaten 4 men in one night. Just an absolute legend. pretty much what started this whole sport was Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. And they picked Little Hoist to be the representative of it because there were bigger guys in the Gracie family, but they felt like if they really wanted to prove a point, they should have, Little Hoist go out there who was like 160 pounds soaking wet and beat up these 200+ pound guys. And the True Fan guys really did a good job of getting interviews from people close to Hoist and Hoist himself. And they did an awesome job of telling his story, really did it justice. So I highly recommend you guys check that out. MMA True Fan, TRUFAN. All right, let's get into some MMA action. Bellator 243 on Friday night. I'll lead with this just because it was worth talking about, which is rare for Bellator card. I didn't think I was going to get a chance to watch this live because it's a Friday night. I like to spend time with the family. I already know I'm going to be watching MMA on Saturday, but the wife fell asleep early Friday, so it was fair game. And I searched for it. It happened to be on cable. It wasn't on the DAZN app. So, hey, why not? So I didn't catch this whole card, but what I did see was good. And I got to see some replays and clips of things that happened earlier in the night. But I will point out the highlights here. So obviously, first of all, the main event, Michael Chandler knocks out Benson Henderson in very violent fashion with just a very overextended left cross that just landed flush. And Benson had like a delayed reaction where he hit the mat and then he looked up like his alarm clock went off on Monday morning and he looked up and then he just said, fuck it, I'm going back to bed. So that was that was kind of, it's always kind of scary to see that when a guy's lights get shut off and it doesn't even register to him right away. But that's the kind of power Michael Chandler possesses. Former lightweight champion over in Bellator. He was a dominant champion over there. One of the most exciting fighters on the roster. There has been a lot of talk over the years of, what if he were to come to the UFC? Would he look as dominant against guys over there? And then he lost a little bit of steam when he lost the championship under some weird circumstances where he had like a sprained ankle or a dead leg in a fight and he couldn't really defend himself. And that's how he lost his championship. So a lot of that talk kind of died down, but it definitely got fired up again after Friday night because he knocked out the former UFC champ, Benson Henderson. And it was revealed that was the last fight on his Bellator contract. Now he's a free agent. So a lot of people are saying, hey, he could end up in the UFC. And then people are taking it a step further. He can beat a lot of guys in the top 5 or 6 in the UFC. I think it's an interesting debate. I would definitely like to see it if it were to happen. Talks seem to be surrounding him having a possible fight with Dustin Poirier. If he makes his UFC debut, I think that would be a really exciting matchup. Here's my concern. The UFC, of course, uses the United States Anti-Doping Agency, or USADA, as we know it by. Now, I'm not going to make any assumptions about Michael Chandler and his performance-enhancing habits, if he has any. But he is definitely very muscular for a human being, closer maybe to a gorilla than an actual human. And, it's pretty well known that the drug tests in Bellator are multiple choice. It's like, A, are you on steroids? B, are you not on steroids? C, no response. And then D is like, please circle B. And that's pretty much the extent of the drug testing that exists in Bellator. But, say he's clean and he's just a natural freak athlete who looks that way and is able to perform that way. I think it's definitely interesting if he comes over. And I think there's a lot of interesting matchups for him there. Spectacular wrestler too, not just knockout power. 3-time All-American, I believe, off the top of my head. I don't have a way to look that up right now. So let's just go with that. 3-time All-American. So yeah, that was cool. Timothy Johnson in the co-main event, another knockout over Matt Mitrione. Mitrione's been having a tough go of it lately. I mean, he was a favorite to win the heavyweight Grand Prix a little while ago. And I just want to say hello to Alex Au, who's just joining the show. And I want to let him know that I have not been able to get a hold of Jeff the Animal Wilson this evening. So feel free to razz him for that when you have the opportunity. So Matt Mitrione was a favorite to win that heavyweight Grand Prix that Bellator had a couple of years ago. And, you know, there were some weird circumstances with it. He had that double knockout fight with Fedor. And, you know, then he had the one with the bad disqualification from the groin shot. And, you know, he's also 42 years old. I understand that's pretty young for a heavyweight fighter, especially these days. But yeah, a first round knockout loss to Timothy Johnson. So that was a tough one for Matt Mitrione. Myles Jury, close split decision win over Georgi Karakhanyan. I didn't think it was that close. I thought Myles Jury pretty clearly won, but apparently one judge disagreed. So of course, the UFC veteran Myles Jury coming away with another victory there. And then Sabah Homasi getting unanimous decision victory over another UFC vet, Curtis Millender. And the story of that fight was that Millender just has not developed his grappling game. He was pretty lost off of his back. You know, was able to not get submitted, but just didn't seem to really know what to do to get back to his feet, where his strength lies in his striking. I'm going to jump around here a little bit. AJ Agazarm, some of you may know who he is if you're very involved in the submission grappling world. He's a bit of a heel in that space. He's known for ticking people off. You can go back and look at his matches with guys like Jake Shields and Wagner Rocha. That's probably the worst one because he pissed off Wagner Rocha before a match one time, and then at the match was on a stage, and AJ was going to walk off the stage, and Wagner came and just Spartan kicked him off the stage, like from that movie 300. Yeah, so he's known for pushing people's buttons and being like a bit of a dick, and that's kind of his character. He's actually got his black belt from right around here in Florida. But I believe he's training with the Diaz brothers, which doesn't really make sense because his boxing was just not existent. I mean, he landed a couple of leg kicks in this fight against Chris Lencioni, but for the most part, he was totally lost. He got Chris Lencioni down in the first round and then just headbutt him in the temple. It was such a dick move, and referee Mike Beltran didn't catch it because they were on the other side. And then he just got his ass kicked from there. And then at the end threw a little hissy fit and refused to shake Lencioni's hand. It was pretty pathetic to watch. I just think, you know, as a grappler, he's good. You know, he wasn't like earth shattering. His whole thing was like going the distance with top level black belts. You know, he was like proud of the fact that he didn't get submitted by Jake Shields, and it went to a draw because under the rule sets, when he grappled Jake Shields, if there was no submission, then there's no winner. So yeah, he's not like an elite grappler, but he is very good. And as an MMA fighter, it's just the skills aren't there. I mean, if he were to fight somebody with good takedown defense that, you know, really wanted to hurt him, it wouldn't be that hard. Lencioni is a good grappler himself, brown belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, I believe. But he was just piecing AJ up in this fight and making him look like he didn't belong in there. Valerie Lareda, a lot of you may follow her on Instagram and not even know it. Buzzer beater knockout for her. She's I believe a Taekwondo black belt. But man, she's got some heavy hands. It's very rare that you see a knockout like the one she performed against Tara Graf on Friday night. And she gets a lot of heat for I guess getting attention for like raunchy pictures on Instagram and stuff, a lot of bikini pictures and stuff like that. But the girl can fight, and she's got some scary power. It's not too often you see vicious knockouts like that from the ladies. So Bellator 243 overall, not a terrible card, and it was available on Paramount Network, which used to be Spike TV. Not the DAZN app. So I don't know what's going on with that contract. I don't know if it's ended, or I don't have any other news on that. But let's get into UFC because there was a lot of fun things on this fight. There were a lot of lulls in the action as well. We'll get into all of it. UFC Fight Night 174, Derrick Lewis versus Alexey Oleynik. So the main event, I'll start there and work my way down. The main event was fun. The first round had everything you could want to see. You saw some wild striking, and then you saw Derrick Lewis engage in the grappling where he held Oleynik up against the cage. And then from that point, it turned into a grappling match that was kind of back and forth. And I'll say this about Derrick Lewis. He has to be the most successful fighter in history at grappling without grappling technique. So he basically does nothing right on the ground and gets away with it. Like, I always think back to his fight with Roy Nelson, who's a big, heavyweight fighter with black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and he had Derrick Lewis in very dominant positions, and Derrick Lewis just bench pressed him off of him like he was nothing. Same thing with Oleynik. Oleynik has like 50-something wins by submission or something ridiculous like that, and Derrick Lewis was able to reverse positions like he was just rolling with a child. And then Oleynik was trying to go for some like very obscure chokes, which is what he's known for. He's going for like a scarf hold, which you kind of sit side saddle to your opponent and wrap up a head and arm and basically kind of squeeze it together. And if you squeeze it just right, you can cut off the circulation to the head, but it's really just a painful neck crank. And apparently Derrick Lewis is not going to tap the pain because he survived it twice. And in the post-fight interview, he said he had that British bulldog choke or whatever it was, which I find hilarious. He doesn't even know the names of the positions that he's escaping, which just increases his charm tenfold. He always gives fantastic post-fight interviews. And Mark Fellows reminded me that when right before his post-fight interview started, he said, "I gotta go take a shit. I'll be back." And then Paul Felder was like, "Hey, Black Beast, I'm here." And he was like, "Oh, what's up?" I mean, you can always count on Derrick Lewis for, really funny post-fight antics, whether he knows he's being funny or not. I mean, I think sometimes he's just being genuinely himself, and it just happens to be funny. So he didn't like what was going on in that first round. So when the second round started, he just rushed Oleynik and hit him with some big strikes and put him out cold. It was a great win for Derrick Lewis. He's got a couple people calling him out. I think the loudest voice is Curtis Blades. I think that fight makes sense. Possibly running it back with Francis Ngannou makes sense as well. So there's only a few options for him because he was already ranked number 4 and fighting a guy below him in the rankings. I'm still a fan of Oleynik, man. That guy is just so unusual that it's going to be entertaining watching him. Like we just saw him try to use like a judo submission that you almost never see in MMA, and we saw him almost get away with it twice. We've seen him hit some submissions that you shouldn't be able to hit without a gi on or in MMA for that matter. So if Oleynik comes back, I'll always be ready to watch his fights. Co-main event, a lot of thoughts on this one. Chris Weidman, Omari Akhmedov. This is a tough one, man, because Chris Weidman has lost 5 of his last 6 fights. He mixed it up in this fight enough, but I felt like he was getting outstruck by Akhmedov, which worries me because Akhmedov was brought in there to not strike with him, if we're being honest. They wanted to give Chris a fight. Akhmedov is a smaller guy, used to fight at 170. They wanted to bring a guy that would, kind of test Chris's grappling and see if he still had it, which he absolutely does. I was talking to a couple of people last night about outside single legs because of what happened in the Darren Stewart fight with that guillotine finish. So I'll get into that in a little bit. But I sometimes teach wrestling to jiu-jitsu people. And what I always tell them is never shoot for an outside single in jiu-jitsu or MMA. Now, that's not like a hard rule that you need to follow, but it's a pretty good one. There's only a couple of people who get away with outside single legs. And one of them is Chris Weidman, and the other one's Ben Askren. Those are the only two I can think of off the top of my head. Now, the reason you don't want to go for an outside single, now what that is when you grab one of your opponent's legs and your head is on the outside of their hip. And you don't want to do that because it leaves your neck exposed for chokes. There are two ways that you can get away with grabbing an outside single. One of them is immediately switching to a double leg takedown, which we saw Chris Weidman do a couple of times against Akhmedov. The other thing is to tuck your chin and drop your shoulder low right above your opponent's knee and kind of drive pressure with your shoulder into the top of their knee and turn them with it. The problem with that is sometimes you shoot too low when you're going for that, and it leaves you open to getting kneed in the face in MMA. In jiu-jitsu, what will happen, especially with lankier guys, if you drop your shoulder too low, they're just going to jump right around you and take your back. So that's why the outside single is a really risky move. And I tell people to just not do it because it's one of those things that unless you have thousands and thousands of reps on it, you're not going to know that sweet spot where you can be successful with it. But Chris Weidman has always had a great outside single in MMA. And he put that on display last night, switched it to the double a couple of times. And he ran Akhmedov to the mat a couple of times. Here's what scared me is he got rocked a couple of times by Akhmedov, who is a guy that has not been known for his knockout power in the UFC. And all of his knockout wins have come in 170 pounds where he had big size advantages. That second round as well, Akhmedov was able to out-grapple Weidman. And then Weidman was able to come back in that third round and be very dominant. I scored it a 10-8 for him. I believe two of the judges did as well. He spent like the last 2 minutes in mount, like hunting submissions. I think he probably could have finished that arm triangle that he was going for if he had just a little bit more gas in the tank, but he had enough gas in the tank to hold Akhmedov down, which is no easy task. That guy is known, he's a Dagestani wrestler. He's known for his grappling and he's known for not being able to be held down. So a lot of good and a lot of bad from Chris Weidman. Obviously it scared me that he kind of got outstruck by Akhmedov for a lot of the fight. The good was that his grappling was there. He was able to out-grapple a very good grappler. But you could tell at the end of the fight, he was exhausted. I mean, this is a guy, who fought in that championship slot for a bunch of his UFC career. I think he's a legend and he's definitely deserving of a space in the Hall of Fame someday. But when I look at the top 10, top 15, top 20 of this middleweight division, there's a lot of worrisome fights for him there. We've got killers in this division now. And I saw Marvin Vettori calling Chris Weidman out, saying he wants to put him out of his misery. And Vittori's a murderer. That would be a really tough fight. If Chris Weidman really wants to continue doing this, and it seems like he does, he said he was putting the middleweight division on notice, then who am I to tell him he shouldn't? But I do think that he has nothing else to prove. He beat one of the most dominant champions of all time in Anderson Silva twice. And that's enough for me to consider him a legend of the sport. It truly is. So I'll leave it at that. I'll get back into the why you shouldn't shoot for an outside single leg with Darren Stewart versus Maki Pitolo. Pitolo just looked like he couldn't find his rhythm in this fight. And, Darren Stewart was really throwing him off. I think he thought he would have more success if he tried to take it to the ground, but he shot for that outside single, not thinking that, Darren Stewart was much of a grappler because he's very striking heavy in most of his fights. And he snatched that neck up quick, man. And he first went for a high elbow guillotine, which is where you connect your hands and you bring one of your elbows up high towards your head. And that kind of cuts off the space and it crushes the windpipe too. It's a very nasty choke, where it's not just cutting off the circulation. It's not cutting off the blood in those carotid arteries going to the brain, but it crushes the windpipe. So oxygen can't get up there and you can't breathe. And it's very painful. He did switch the grip up and turn it into what's called a modified guillotine, which is like a backwards rear naked choke grip. And it was an awesome finish. 341 in the first round. Big finish for Darren Stewart there. So that was a super impressive performance. Yana Kunitskaya and Julija Stolyarenko. I mean, I don't want to be mean here, but this fight was kind of a lull in the card for me. It was a lot of Kunitskaya holding Stolyarenko up against the cage. I guess trying to get her arms filled up with blood and get her tired. Just not a lot of action in this fight, especially coming off of Beneil Dariush and Scott Holtzman. This one was action, bell to almost bell of the first round. Dariush was just unloading on Scott Holtzman, caught 2 fingers in the eye, which that was hard to watch. He got hot sauce in his eye, I was saying while I was watching this. I don't even have Jeff here to laugh at that, so don't feel guilty if you didn't laugh at that either. So Dariush, just, man, he was unloading on Holtzman. I was wondering what this guy's chin was made of, because Holtzman's never been finished in MMA, I believe, as a professional anyway. And man, Dariush was throwing everything at him. He was just lighting him up to the face, to the body, everything. And finally, at the end of the round, he was going for a spinning back fist, but he winds up connecting with his forearm. And, the fight was stopped by Herb Dean immediately as soon as Holtzman hit the ground, and he was out of it. Tim Means looked, not really like the Tim Means of old. It wasn't the fight I was expecting from him against Laureano Staropoli. I felt like Staropoli was very much outclassed in this fight. I thought Tim Means was better everywhere, but there was just something missing, that Tim Means dirty bird aggressiveness that we're so used to seeing from him. It just wasn't there, where he's in there and he's fighting like a man with a chip on his shoulder. I didn't see that Tim Means in there. But what I did see was a very technical Tim Means who, just outclassed his opponent absolutely everywhere. Unanimous decision victory for Tim Means. Then we had Kevin Holland, who was supposed to fight last week, but his opponent fainted on the way to the octagon. And, Dana White said he would take care of him. He would get him a fight soon. He did get him a fight. He got him Joaquin Buckley. And, man, Buckley was a game opponent. I think a lot of people were expecting Kevin Holland to come in and smoke this guy, who is pretty new, if not making his UFC debut. I think he may have been making his debut. Feel free to correct me on that, though. But Holland, he was controlling a lot of the fight, and then Buckley, landed a couple of low blows, and I would not want to get a low blow from this guy because he's built like a tank. He's built like Herschel Walker. If any of you guys have ever seen Herschel Walker in MMA, he's one of the most like densely muscled guys I've ever seen, and Buckley is right up there with him. I feel like Buckley could definitely, lose a little bit of that muscle and do very well at welterweight. But Kevin Holland, proving that he's still someone to keep eyes on with with the way he finished this fight, 43 seconds in the third round, just a nasty cross that was just right on the jaw, sent the mouthpiece flying. If you guys didn't see this one, go back and watch it. At the very least, go back and watch the third round. Awesome performance by Kevin Holland. And then, what's most impressive about Kevin Holland is you could tell he's coachable just by the way his cornermen speak to him and the way that he responds. You could tell that he knows after the fight is over that he has things that he needs to work on, and he's going to go and work on them. So I definitely see a bright future for Kevin Holland. I've been pretty high on him for a while, and he's got like a deceiving record too, because he's just now kind of getting attention for whatever reason. But he's been around the UFC for a while. He was on the he was on the second season of Dana White's Contender Series. And then his first fight in the UFC was against Thiago Santos. And he went the distance with him. Wins over Gerald Mearshart. Win over Anthony Hernandez, a nasty knockout in his last fight. And then if you go back to before he was in the UFC, he actually has a win over Jeff Neal, knocked him out back in 2017. Obviously, Jeff Neal has been on fire in the UFC. But yeah, a lot of experience. And I guess I felt because he came through the Contender Series, and I don't know if a lot of people feel this way too, that he wasn't that experienced, but he's got 23 fights. So definitely somebody to keep an eye on going forward. Nasrat Haqparast, or Little Kelvin Gastelum, as a lot of people call him, with the unanimous decision over Alex Munoz, who's making his UFC debut. Haqparast, man, it was just the striking pressure here. And I was really impressed with Munoz's wrestling. The only thing about him was, I guess with the wrestling, maybe he gassed himself a little bit. And then some of his striking combinations, he was repeating them a lot. And Haqparast picked up on it. And that's why you saw him standing closer in the pocket and countering Munoz quite a bit. But, first UFC fight, I still think that Munoz looked good. And I think maybe there are some lower competition matchups for him wandering around. Andrew Sanchez, who has been known to be like the not so entertaining wrestler, shows up with a mullet last night and just knocks the fuck out of Wellington Turman in the first round. He was doing his typical bullying him up against the cage, but then, showed that he has that one punch knockout power. So, that's a scary tool in the tool belt for Andrew Sanchez, or anybody looking to get in there with him. Then we had Gavin Tucker, third round, rear naked choke submission over Justin James, sorry. And James you could tell he wanted out of this fight after the second round, just by the way he looked so frustrated going back to his corner. And, it's tough seeing that from fighters, if they don't really want to be out there, or, once they have in their head that they don't have a path to victory, they kind of just defeat themselves. And that's always sad to see, but great performance by Gavin Tucker, who then proceeded to call out Billy Quarantillo, who has a fight lined up. So unfortunately, that's not going to come together. But I know Billy was very excited to be called out on ESPN on the prelims of this card. So I got to imagine Gavin Tucker and Billy Quarantillo will be crossing paths sometime soon. But he's got a fight. And I can tell you who Billy's fighting in just a second. It was just announced this week. And then our buddy Matt Steamroller Favola also has a fight, and I don't think I can tell you guys who it's against yet. I mean, he kind of alluded to it on his Instagram story, and I know who it is, but I'm not gonna put it out there in case there's something with a contract or something like that. All right, so Kyle Nelson is going to be the one fighting Billy Quarantillo on September 12th in Las Vegas. So that'll be a fun one because Kyle Nelson Very violent striker. Billy Quarantillo, very violent striker. So I'm happy for him that he's excited about the matchup that he got. Yusuf Zalal, very dominant performance over Peter Barrett. And then there was a split decision, Erwin Rivera over Ali Al-Casey. Zalal looked good. He had like a wild, like spinning back kick to the face, like right in the first round. He was fun to watch. So this was a fun card overall. I think the main event delivered. There were a couple of low points, a couple of dry fights, but for the most part, I think it was a really fun card. All right, so this is usually where I ask Jeff if he has anything else to say about this or if we can move on. But since Jeff's not here, I want to remind you all, in case you're just tuning in, we couldn't get a hold of Jeff the Animal Wilson. So if anybody knows where he is, I might file a missing persons report after this. And if anybody knows where the animal is, please harass him on social media at @animal_Wilson, Twitter and Instagram. All right, so back to pay-per-view next week. The heavyweights, UFC 252. I need another sip of tequila before I get into this one. I'm really excited for this one. And I don't know how to feel about it because it's two guys in the main event. This is their rubber match. So they've each won a fight against each other by knockout. And now they're going to settle it and see who the better fighter is once and for all. Stipe Miocic and Daniel Cormier for the heavyweight championship of the world. Cormier has made it very well known that this will be his last fight and he's going to retire because, he's been competing for so long. I think he didn't even start MMA until he was like my age, like 35, which is crazy to think. That he's accomplished so much, 2-division world champion and everything in between. What a legacy. 22-2, Miocic 19-3. I'm such a big fan of both of these guys, and I love watching both of them fight. And it's so hard because we saw two completely different fights from these guys. In the second fight, Miocic was having a hard time with DC and he made adjustments. He started going to the body and really broke DC down. And that's why he was able to get that knockout, because once you take a guy's wind away, the knockout comes much easier because, if they're not able to get that oxygen in their body, they can't recover from those big headshots. And DC is known for having an incredible chin. Obviously, the only people to knock him out, Stipe and John Jones. So, if you're able to tell people like, yeah, I've never lost, I've only been knocked out by two guys, and it's Stipe Miocic and John Jones, like, oh, wow, must be pretty fucking good. I don't know where I'm leaning with this one. I think, I'm not a betting man, but I'll give you guys a lean towards a pick. I'm not going to make a pick, but I'll give you a lean towards a pick. I think gun to my head, I would pick Stipe just because I feel like you should never bet on a retiring fighter. Once they know it's their last fight, it tends to not be a good recipe for them inside the cage or inside the ring. We've seen this historically. And the other reason I would lean towards Stipe is because of the two of them, he's the one that was able to make adjustments after seeing what the other guy brings to the table. He faced adversity from Cormier and he figured out a game plan in the middle of the fight. So since he was able to do that in the middle of the fight and actually apply it and use it to get a knockout victory, I tend to think that he's going to make some adjustments in between fights as well. Not to say that Cormier won't, but Cormier, kind of has his game plan and sticks to it. He's gonna wrestle you unless he doesn't have to, and he's putting hands on you because he's got good boxing. I think Cormier will make adjustments as well, but for those two reasons, never bet on a retiring fighter and the ability for Stipe to make adjustments. That's why I would lean towards him, but It's hard not to root for both of these guys because they're both amazing champions. Sean O'Malley getting the co-main event slot against Marlon Chito Vera. So the undefeated Sean O'Malley coming off of a highlight reel knockout in his last fight, which was only, a month and a half ago. Getting back in there with Marlon Vera. These two were scheduled to fight a few months ago, and it just kind of fell apart. And I think Vera's coming off a loss, but O'Malley said that, he owed him the fight, and he felt like, he deserved it. So he's wanted to give him the shot. Co-main event for Sugar Sean O'Malley. You can't deny the star power of that kid. He's just got that it factor where he's able to make people want to watch because of his personality, dyeing his hair rainbow colors, face tattoos, whatever other wacky things. And then plus he can fight. The kid's a spectacle, and he's able to back it all up too. And I think he's playing his career the smart way, where he's picking fights with guys who are going to stand up with him instead of try and take him down, even though he feels very competent on the ground. I've seen him in quintet grappling. He's a pretty solid purple belt. Obviously wasn't able to hang with the high level black belts in that grappling competition, but he didn't care. He got on the mat with them anyway. And I think it's that kind of competitive nature that's going to allow him to see a lot of success. Another really fun heavyweight fight, Junior Dos Santos and Jairzinho Rozenstruik. So Rozenstruik only one loss, that last brutal knockout to Francis Ngannou. But other than that, man, we know this guy can take a beating because of the Overeem fight, where Overeem battered him for 4.5 rounds, and then he came back and knocked out Overeem with like 6 seconds left and, split his lip open, the whole thing. You guys remember that? And Dos Santos, some of the best hands in heavyweight history. You could even make the argument that he's the best boxer to ever fight at heavyweight in the UFC. Rozenstruik has that more kickboxing style. I think he has like 100 kickboxing fights or something ridiculous like that. So that's going to be a fun stand-up war. Then we got John Dodson and Merab Dvalishvili. This is going to be a fun one. John Dodson, an absolute veteran who has been known to play spoiler for, these young fighters that he's supposed to lose to. Coming off of a TKO over Nathaniel Wood. And before that, it had been a long time since he finished anybody. So the Nathaniel Wood fight was in February, and before that, he hadn't had a finish since 2016 against Manny Gambarian, and he had kind of been up and down since then. I mean, this is a guy who was just on fire in these lower weight classes in the beginning. And at some point, he kind of lost that trademark energy a little bit. He used to be doing backflips off the cage and stuff, and I guess that comes with being 35. I'm not going to be doing backflips off the cage anymore. But Merab, man, this guy is really something special. He's coming out of Ray Longo's gym in Long Island, and he just has this relentless pressure. We've heard all the stories of him in the gym, how he'll spar 5 rounds and then they got to pull him off the heavy bag and make him go home. And he's looking for more people to spar with, and they got to get him to pump the brakes, and he just won't. I believe he set the record in his last fight for most takedowns in a bantamweight fight as well. Magomed Ankalaev and Ion Cutelaba. These are two just monsters that are going to get in here in the light heavyweight division. And Ankalaev has the TKO win over Cutelaba in his last fight, but it was kind of a weird thing. The referee was Kevin McDonald, and Cutelaba got kind of wobbly, and he started doing like a rope-a-dope falling against the cage. And then Ankalaev just kind of mauled him, and Kevin McDonald stopped the fight, and Cutelaba thought he was fine. He said he was just playing around. I don't think that's a smart game to play in MMA. Doing the rope-a-dope, which is, made popular in boxing. Because in boxing, they're not going to stop the fight if you look dazed and you keep getting punched as long as you're still standing. But in MMA, if you look dazed and you get hit one more time, there's always a possibility the fight's getting stopped. So luckily, Ankalaev believed that him and Cutelaba had unfinished business, so he's giving him the rematch. So that should be a wild fight. A lot of emotions involved there. Jim Miller, how do you not love Jim Miller getting in there against Vince Pichel, who has been on a pretty long layoff? Jim Miller looked fantastic in his last fight, submitting Roosevelt Roberts. Herbert Burns coming back. Of course, Gilbert Burns' brother. He's going to be fighting Daniel Pineda. Felice Herrig on this card against Virna Jandiroba. And we'll leave it at that. I don't know about you guys. I'm so excited for this main event. Stipe and DC part 3. How do you not love that fight? I'm looking up and down this card and I'm trying to find like the sleeper fight for you guys, but I keep looking back at this main event. But I'll give you one anyway. I'll tell you that Ankalaev and Cutelaba, because I feel like a lot of people aren't talking about that fight. But, make sure you don't take that fight as an opportunity to go make popcorn or go get yourself, Maestro Dobel, which I definitely recommend. Smoked tequila. Make yourself a spicy margarita for fight nights this Saturday. And that's all I got. Yeah, a lot of bike riding today. I'm beat. I'm exhausted, but still wanted to come on and do the show solo since the animal stood me up. Anyway, I hope I brought enough energy for you guys tonight. Gave you everything that I've got in the tank right now. I got to go address this sunburn, and a little more tequila couldn't hurt as well. So we're going to call it a show. Hopefully the animal will be back next week. Please go harass him. Don't forget, MMA on the Rocks t-shirts are on sale. Put the link right in the show notes. So just read the description down below if you're watching on YouTube or Facebook, or just click on it in whatever podcast app you happen to be consuming the show on. And while you're on that app, please do leave a review for the show. It really helps. It helps boost us in the rankings and helps other people find the show, so more people can join the party. We can get more people on for these brawl crawls when we decide to do them, and things like that, and just interact with more people. Thanks to everybody who is listening or watching or however you're tuning into the show. We definitely appreciate it. And that's it. That's all we got. So until next time, cheers, everybody. Goodbye.